Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have you for today's webinar. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Corporate and Executive Education at the Brown School of Professional Studies. The mission of the Brown School of Professional Studies is to empower you to change the way the world works for good. And we do that by offering a portfolio of programs, including master's degrees, certificates, and short programs that teach in-demand skills on a schedule that works for a busy working professional like yourself. And in addition, we're really proud to get to offer these amazing free sessions with our incredible faculty like Mike on the most in-demand topics to keep you up to date with the skills that you need to know. And it was clear by the incredible feedback we got from you that ChatGPT is certainly one of those. We had 833 people register for this webinar, which is a record-breaking number. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for your interest. I was at a conference recently, and a stat that really struck me is that as of March, 70% of students have reported using ChatGPT for their work, but only 30% of faculty said the same. And as I was reflecting on this, I was thinking about how this seems really true to me for the workplace as well, that the average day-to-day worker, we have started to use ChatGPT in our office, maybe not optimally, but we've started to play around with it, but that most managers and leaders don't yet know how to incorporate it into workflows and make things more productive using this tool. And so this is really truly a leadership competency that we all need to know, because there are huge implications, both positive and negative, for the future of our careers and our organizations. So I'm so excited that we get to examine what ChatGPT is and how it will impact us together today. I'd like to encourage you to please submit your questions throughout today's session. There's going to be a lot, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But if I see your questions in advance, I can start grouping and get to as many as possible. So when you have your question, don't wait till the end. Click on your bottom bar, click on Q&A, and type in your question there, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. And now I'm so pleased to get to introduce our faculty member today. I can't think of a better person than Mike Grandinetti to teach us on this incredible topic. And there are opportunities for you to continue to learn from him that I'll discuss in more detail towards the end. Mike Grandinetti is an adjunct professor in the School of Engineering at Brown University, but it's not all theory for him. He's also a veteran Silicon Valley engineer and McKinsey consultant, plus was the chief of operations for 8 startups. So he knows how this actually works in practice. He's affiliated with MIT, Harvard, and Berkeley, in addition to Brown, and yet still somehow found time to be here with us today. Thank you so much, Mike, and I'll hand it over to you now.
And Allison, thank you so much for that very gracious introduction. And hello, everyone, and welcome. There is no question that ChatGPT has become a phenomena like none that I have seen in my 25-year career, really immersed in the cutting edge innovation space. And so today what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about what ChatGPT is, why you can't help but seeing articles about it, hear podcasts about it, hear it on your evening news broadcast, and more importantly, how it impacts you as an individual professional and how it will impact your company, your team, your department going forward. Okay. And there's a lot to unpack here. And, the only thing I will say is, I've been living in the world of advanced tech for my entire career, in Silicon Valley, in Boston, both as a practitioner at startups, a practitioner at Hewlett-Packard in its early days, and as an innovation consultant at McKinsey, where we worked with some of the largest companies in the world around innovation strategy. So this is something that I am deeply passionate about. And so throughout history, beginning with the Industrial Revolution, humankind has lived through a significant number of innovation cycles, each of them powered by some very unique, very significant invention that has changed the quality of life, the pace of life, the experience of life as we know it. So, for example, during the second wave of innovation, steam power really led to the Industrial Revolution. The invention of the railroad changed the way that we think about distance. The ability to forge steel changed the way that we thought about buildings. Of course, in the era of Edison, electricity profoundly changed life as we know it today. The internal combustion engine led to the age of the automobile. And now we're in the digital era. And we have very rapidly transcended the fifth wave, which is software. And all of you know software largely through the apps on your phone and on your laptops. And we are now in this wave that is being driven by largely artificial intelligence, robots and drones, and of course, clean tech as well. What I want you to note in the timeline at the bottom is that each successive wave of innovation actually is compressed. It becomes tighter. And the second thing, as you move further to the right, what you see is the slope of the curve, which means the impact of the innovation happens more quickly and has more impact. And so we are now moving into an era where we are seeing a rapid acceleration of innovation. Now, we have lived through two very significant Promethean moments in recent history. For those of you who know your Greek mythology, of course, Prometheus was the Greek god that brought us fire. And what we saw in 1995 was the democratization of what was known as DARPANET, or the internet, which up until that time was the province of largely academic researchers and people making their living in the defense industry. And with the help of Tim Berners-Lee from CERN and then Mark Andreessen, the founder of the company Netscape, the Mosaic browser was dropped and everything changed. And today, of course, we're all here together from wherever we may be in the world over the World Wide Web on Zoom. And so the digital era really began in this time frame. And then just a short time later, the most successful product in the history of humankind was launched, the iPhone, and a very important complementary asset, the App Store. And it turned this little mini device, this supercomputer, into something like a Swiss Army knife with 10,000 useful blades and tools on it. 2.5 billion iPhones have been purchased around the world. And if anything has created an understanding of the digital lifestyle, it is the iPhone and some of the subsequent innovations that come out of Apple. And so quietly in the background now, for almost 75 years, there's been a massive amount of investment in artificial intelligence and a lot of important milestones that have been achieved. And whether you realize it or not, you have been interacting with a lot of AI-based tools like Siri and Alexa. Some of you may use Grammarly as a way to help you correct your grammar and make your copy more compelling. But all of a sudden, in November of this past, the year past, 2022, a very significant milestone was reached in the era of AI. And that was the release of ChatGPT version 3.5, which then was updated in March to become ChatGPT 4. And the reason that I have this above the surface of the water with this iceberg image is because I want to make it very clear that the vast majority of artificial intelligence is below the surface, and we do not have the time today to get into it. We're really going to talk about one and only one generative AI chatbot, which is ChatGPT. Of course, you must know there are other ones like Bard from Google that are in existence, but we're going to keep things very streamlined today to make sure that we're able to leave you with some actionable takeaways, right? What makes this so powerful? Well, we have moved. Some of you may be old enough to remember the old Windows DOS operating system where we had command line programming. And then Steve Jobs brought us the graphical user interface, which dramatically changed the way that we interface with computers and what Steve Jobs called a bicycle for the mind. He wanted it to be accessible. And now with ChatGPT, we're able to communicate with it through plain spoken language, whether it be English or the other 65 languages that it is available in today, right? So it understands, we just are literally able to type in words at a prompt, and it is able to very rapidly come back and provide answers to us. And so this is what has made it so incredibly accessible and so viral. And so not that long ago, a colleague of mine in Munich, Germany, who works for an advertising and marketing agency said, Mike, I started using ChatGPT to automatically create presentations, and I actually started weeping. And that may sound a bit silly, but her message was she has invested so much time in making presentations compelling. And then with the push of a button, she was able to create really powerful presentations in seconds. And so Arthur Clarke, the great science fiction author, has been quoted as saying, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And for many people, ChatGPT certainly does feel like magic. And because of its simplicity of use and its powerful ability to generate all kinds of information, it has taken off like a rocket ship. And here are some staggering numbers. It took literally 5 days, just the length of one business week, for the first 1 million users to download and adopt it. Netflix took 3.5 years, Airbnb 2.5 years. And then it took literally 2 months to get to 100 million users. It took Spotify 55 months. It took Uber 70 months to get to that level of adoption. So we are seeing something that has been not experienced ever in our lifetimes. And so not surprisingly, ChatGPT specifically and generative AI more generally have captured the imagination. And while I'm showcasing recent cover stories and two of the more thoughtful and let's be honest, the kinds of publications that people who crave very, very deep, thoughtful content. But there's a lot of publications that have written about ChatGPT that are, mainstream publications, lowbrow publications. You can't escape its notice. Now, here's what's remarkable, is as much visibility as ChatGPT has received, and I mean, it's just endless, only 14% of people have used it to date, according to the Pew Research Center. Only 25% of all small business owners are actually testing it today in their business, according to a recent study by FreshBooks. And what's remarkable is that almost half of all small business owners simply do not understand what value ChatGPT creates. And that is really what the essence of the rest of this talk is about. So what we have learned, especially those of us who have studied innovation, is that once the genie comes out of the bottle, you cannot put it back in. There is no winning strategy by becoming an enemy of the future. You put yourself on a very unlevel playing field. There is a reason why half of the Fortune 500 has simply vanished. It wasn't a magical act. They did not embrace innovation quickly enough or robustly enough to remain vibrant, to remain viable, to remain significant. And they were outdone and disrupted by upstarts that were willing to embrace new technology. And so the lessons of history are very clear. And so this is sort of a who's who of specific moments in the evolution of AI, from the great Russian chess champion Garry Kasparov being defeated by the IBM Deep Blue algorithm, by the legends of Jeopardy being defeated by the IBM Watson algorithm, by 20 of the world's poker pros losing collectively $20 million by playing against the poker AI algorithm known as Lebradas, or two of the world's top players of the insanely popular game StarCraft, each losing twice 5-0. AI algorithms are designed to be extraordinarily effective at what they do. And the lesson should be that rather than fight the power, rather than resist, let's look at these chatbots as benevolent assistants, very much like R2-D2 and C-3PO were in the classic movie Star Wars. So as we look at this Venn diagram, specifically at the lower left, how work is being done, a very important part of the intense debate about the future of work. Okay, and boy, there's a lot of new types of paradigms that are being designed, but we're going to focus on how work is being done, specifically where AI has entered the workforce. One of my very favorite quotes is attributed to the futurist Alvin Toffler, that the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but instead are those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so if we want to continue to remain professionally competent, if we want to continue to perform exceptionally in the workplace, then we need to learn new skills. We need to reskill and upskill. And so ChatGPT offers us an opportunity to do that if we embrace it. So let's talk about what ChatGPT can do. First of all, is it anything other than a fad? And so I want to just very quickly reference a recent research project that was led by two PhDs at MIT. And it's a working paper, and it was looking for experimental evidence on the productivity effects of using ChatGPT. This was a study group of 440 professionals. They were both given two identical writing tasks. And in the first task, neither had any opportunity to access ChatGPT for their writing. But in the second, they broke the group in two. There was a control group and a treatment group. And the treatment group did, in fact, have ChatGPT. And what resulted was that the ChatGPT users were 37% more productive in their writing than the control group. And more importantly, that the job satisfaction increased dramatically. So those who were in the treatment group, which is the green line going up and to the right with the triangle at the end, saw a dramatic improvement in their job satisfaction, because what ChatGPT did is it removed a lot of the tedious work that might be required in writing. And so there's no question that, and I'm going to share a lot of case studies from the real world that will support this based on my own relationships. So bottom line is, what does ChatGPT do? The question is, what does it not do? It helps us to summarize long, complex reports and articles. We can delegate it to become our research assistant. We get to have the chance to brainstorm with it to generate new ideas and concepts. It's very good at synthesizing and providing us with takeaways. It's exceptionally good at writing. And so therefore, it's being used widely, of course, in marketing and social media and advertising, as well as grant writing, for example. We've seen profound improvements in the amount of code that is being generated by programmers. It's able to extract patterns from large data sets, and it helps us to reformat very messy, unstructured text into tabular data, okay? And so now here's a very interesting thing. I suspect many of you who are on our call with us today, and by the way, there are almost 300 of you with us today, which is just quite extraordinary. I would bet a large number of you, if it's consistent with the fact that Microsoft has 50% market share around the Office suite globally, that you're using Microsoft 365 at work and maybe at home. What you may know is that Microsoft has released and will continue to release what is called Copilot. And what Microsoft Copilot does is it essentially integrates many of the algorithms, including ChatGPT, into the Office 365 suite. Now, Microsoft 365 has 350 million users. They're used by over 1 million companies around the world, including 145,000 just in the United States. And they control half the market. And so what does this mean for those of you who are using Microsoft 365? Well, it means that you are at the cutting edge of how productivity suites are incorporating generative AI for your benefit. So in the upper left, you have all of the Office apps and the icons that you know so well. In the lower left, it's basically saying you have access to all of your own data that you have generated, all of the business data that you have access to. And then on the other side, you're able to draw on the pre-trained large language models that lie at the heart of why ChatGPT is able to do what it does. So it uses GPT-4, which is the most current version of ChatGPT. It uses Codex, and what Codex is, it's a voice-activated ability to search the large language model. So this is very, very powerful in customer call centers and contact centers and things of that nature, and integrated voice response systems. And then the third one, some of you may know, is DALL-E, right? All three of these are from the company known as OpenAI, led by Sam Altman, who's been very visible, testifying before Congress and has been on a world tour. DALL-E is the algorithm that allows you to take text and turn it into a gorgeous image. And so what does this mean for us? Well, it means many things. Something as simple as you log on to Copilot, and it prompts you and asks you, almost like a concierge, how can I help you? And you very simply type in, book me a meeting room for 6 people on Friday. I want catering, and I want to know if the attendees are available, and if they are, send the meeting invite. Within seconds, Copilot tells you that the conference room known as Atlas has been booked, attendees are in fact available, and the invite was sent. Seconds. Think about how much time you've saved, not having to look at everybody's calendar or send out a Calendly invite. And all of a sudden, you've got the catering team that is ready to go. Or you can ask Copilot, again, ChatGPT is the source, but it's giving it access to the company's data and your data to create a budget proposal for a research project. You can be on the receiving end and say, now that I got this proposal, please draft a response with my approval, but please do go ahead and highlight some of the key risks from the @project file, okay? You can ask it to draw on company data around what products were the most profitable in the current quarter. Now, what I showed you are things that you can access through Microsoft Copilot, but you don't need to be a Microsoft user to be able to do very much the same things that we just talked about. So here is just a very simple example of a woman, Kristen, who wanted to send a brief email to an executive recruiter after an interview. And she just prompts, it says, please write a very short thank you email to send to a recruiter after my interview. And almost in seconds, that follow-up letter is sent, and then she has the ability to edit it to her heart's content before she sends it. Some of you may recognize this gentleman. He is Evan Spiegel. He is the founder and CEO of Snapchat. And Evan, being obviously a very visible, not just a tech luminary, but also someone who is very well known amongst the people that are graduating from universities today, because he's created an app that they love. He was asked to deliver a commencement address at a graduation. And the way that he used ChatGPT is he wrote a first draft, submitted to ChatGPT, and then prompted it by saying, how can you help me make this speech better? And so ChatGPT became his speaking coach. And through multiple iterations, he felt like he delivered a far better speech than he would have on his own. Ethan Mollick is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He writes, as I do and so many professors do, a huge number of letters of recommendation for our top students, whether they're going into industry or going on for additional degrees. And so what's interesting here is you can see the difference between the response in the middle, which is Google Bard, versus the response on the right, which is ChatGPT. And so ChatGPT was able to develop a very sophisticated letter of recommendation that someone as eloquent and as well-spoken as Ethan Mollick is, was able to feel comfortable sending this out on behalf of a student, okay? Now, there's no question, because of ChatGPT's amazing writing skills, that it is really ideally tuned for social media posts, for ad copywriting. And it turns out that using DALL-E, which is the sister, the image generator of OpenAI, you can create gorgeous imagery that can also be used in your ad copy or, in your website, in your brochures. And so, you can instantly create a website just by prompting ChatGPT to create a website and being, clear about what you want it to convey. And then for those of you out there, out of the 300 that are out there that are involved in the world of software development, a colleague and friend of mine, Shameen Mohammed, who is both the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Technology Officer at CarMax, someone who has won many, many awards for his forward-looking visionary approach. He and I are colleagues through the MIT CIO Symposium, and I had a chance to talk to him over a month ago now at the symposium. He said, Mike, we're seeing 30% increases in the amount of productivity of our software developers. There was a recent Wall Street Journal podcast that said that developers are becoming so productive, it's almost becoming difficult for the quality teams to check their code. So that is just an incredible level of productivity that we're seeing in in a world where we're short, some would say over 1 million programmers today. So it's really a profound change. So the message then is that it doesn't matter what the disruption is. It could have been the dot-com bubble. It could have been the subprime crisis. It could have been COVID-19, but now it's ChatGPT. Do not take this nonchalant, Luddite response that, the effect of ChatGPT on our business is years away. We don't really need to change anytime soon. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, I have to argue with that vehemently. That's just no way to take on something of this magnitude. And so there's no question that the pace of change has never been this fast, and take it from someone who has been studying change, helping to drive change for 25 years. And I assure you, it will never be this slow again. And so what do we do about it, right? It's time for us to level up ourselves and our organizations, right? This is not a fad. This is not overhyped. This is generating almost magical kinds of outcomes. Every week I get a newsletter from OpenAI sharing with me all of the new applications that have been created on top of their trained large language models. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new applications are being generated every day. So it's only going to become more present in our daily lives. And so what I would really encourage you to think about is, how do you include as much of your people, as much of the company as possible into your AI agenda? Provide broad training to your workers on the use of ChatGPT and generative AI, and make it easy for them. Build tools for workers to help one another share what they've learned, help one another level up. For example, can you create crowdsourced prompt libraries, right? What is a prompt? A prompt is the way that you ask ChatGPT to give you information. There's an art form to prompting that can generate far more valuable responses. And those who have been using it obviously know what those prompts need to be. Why not let everybody in the company share it? Finally, we're at the beginning of a revolution. Right now, Wave 1 generative AI is largely about providing a lot of information to a prompt, and it's a lot about individual productivity, although that can be then collectively shared. But where we're moving to is what is called synthesis AI. And synth AI is different. Synth AI is where the user interface for these algorithms is embedded into existing company workflows, or it is completely automated. And it is going to dramatically improve both the speed and the quality of our work output. And what's going to happen over time is we're going to move from these generic data sets that have been trained by people like Amazon or have been trained by people like Google or OpenAI to very industry-specific or even company-specific data models that are going to deliver orders of magnitude more kinds of capability and output. So the bottom line is, there is no question this will disrupt the world as we know it in ways we cannot even imagine. And so we all have agency. We now can choose how we respond to this profoundly disruptive inflection point in the workplace. And the inspirational Nelson Mandela, quoting from the poem that sustained him for 27 years, "I'm the master of my own fate. I am the captain of my own soul." Each of us has the ability to decide how we're going to respond to this. So let me stop there and turn this back over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Mike. This was absolutely incredible. I always learn so much from you, and I hope everyone else here did as well. And if you would like to continue learning from Mike, I'm really, really excited to announce to you that we have just launched a brand new short program called Innovate to Elevate. And this program helps you to harness the power of innovation and entrepreneurial thinking and the latest tools like ChatGPT to future-proof yourself and your organization. So I'm going to give a really brief overview of it, and then we'll move to your Q&A. So first, just briefly touching on why innovation matters so much, though I feel Mike has already covered this very well, but the research is very clear that innovation is a crucial leadership competency for profitability, career advancement, and talent attraction and retention. Innovative companies achieve 2.6 times higher shareholder returns over 5 years. 62% of CEOs identify innovation as a top 3 priority for their organization, and 82% of professionals prefer to work for companies that are known for their innovative culture. However, and this is a big one, only 21% of executives report that their company has the expertise, resources, and commitment to pursue these new growths successfully. And so this is a crucial leadership skill that can help differentiate you in your organization and or in the job market. This program is for 4 primary audiences. The first is directors and VPs who are looking to shape your organization's strategy and products in the face of disruption. Secondly is the program and project managers and innovation team members who are looking to launch new products. Third is those of you in HR and culture who want to create more of a culture of innovation and creativity. And lastly is anyone who is looking to level up their careers. This program will be offered in the fall, September 13th through October 4th. It is just 4 weeks of synchronous sessions every Wednesday from September 13th through October 4th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so fitting nicely into your busy schedule. The curriculum will cover 4 primary topics. The first is how to harness key factors driving disruption so that you take advantage of disruption rather than be disrupted. Secondly is how to innovate to unlock new possibilities to future-proof yourself and your organization through innovation. Third is how to cultivate a creative culture to make it just a daily practice within your organization instead of siloed into these teams. And lastly is how to activate creativity to future-proof your organization and team, how to go from the dreaded blank page to an insight. By the end of this program, you'll be able to future-proof yourself and your organization by harnessing the lessons learned from historic innovations that both went really well and really badly. You will be able to leverage disruptions to create innovation solutions that drive growth, value, and profitability. You'll update your knowledge on top trends like ChatGPT, like we did today, and also on AI and machine learning. You'll build your toolkit of in-demand innovation skills, which includes human-centric design, lean methodologies, continuous digital transformation, and hackathons. And lastly, you'll cultivate a culture of continuous improvement in your organization, ensuring that the skills you learn here benefit not just you, but also your teams and organizations to remain competitive in this marketplace. And you don't have to take our word for it. Paul Sullivan, the Director of Business Planning and Analysis at Novartis, has said this curriculum is essential for anyone who wants to know what it takes to stay relevant in the coming years. If you do want to join us, we'd love to have you. Please join us by completing a short enrollment form at the link below, which we are also about to share in the chat. So if you can please share that in the chat, thank you very much. And if you register by June 30th, which is just 2 days from now, you'll save $500, and we'll send a follow-up email with this information as well. But the deadline to enroll is September 8th. So thank you so much for being a part of today's webinar and learning with us and learning how you can continue to learn from Mike. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll move over to the Q&A. And we have a lot of questions, so we're going to get to as many as we possibly can. And the first question that has been asked is, why do you think the use and testing of ChatGPT is so underutilized, that 14% number you shared?
Yeah, it's not surprising in that people in general just resist change, right? Human nature is something that people resist change. Now, there's a second part, which is a lot of, and I think Allison really started the talk with this around the importance of leadership, right? So in many instances, it's the leaders that are reacting out of fear. And they're not encouraging their employees to use it. And there are many companies that have forbidden their employees to use it. And so I think it's a combination of a knee-jerk response of fear, of having data that might be stolen because it's going to be used to train models, but also this is not atypical, right? And quite frankly, 14% in 6 months compared to what I've seen over my career is actually way faster than you would think. So it's a great question. And I really do believe that when it becomes a part of the Office suite and more people start using it in business, it will become normalized and we will see a dramatic spike because it's just hard to argue with the results.
Thank you. We have a bunch of questions that are asking about privacy and copyright in various ways. So I'm going to try to combine them a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about privacy concerns that ChatGPT brings up, and then how we ought to cite ChatGPT if we do use it?
Yeah. So first of all, there is a feature in ChatGPT where you can let ChatGPT know that you do not want it to use the data that you are entering into the prompts into its training, right? So you have every opportunity to do that. Okay, so this is something that unfortunately is not widely known. I think there's a lot of fear about ChatGPT stealing organizational data, but you know, the reason that Sam Altman created OpenAI is because he foresaw a lot of the societal challenges and concerns, and he really created this out of a sense of responsibility to guide the development of AI in a responsible way, right? And as many of you may know, he's been out really on a very aggressive roadshow all over the world, you know, really encouraging governments to come up with sensible policies to protect people's privacy and to protect their data. Okay, so that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, I think, is something where, you know, I would, and as someone who's a professor, and I'll be honest, I didn't see a lot of people citing ChatGPT in my classroom last year, although I asked them to. I think it's just very important at a minimum to say that the first draft was generated by ChatGPT, or this is a passage that came directly from ChatGPT that I thought was very, very relevant, right? I think these are very simple ways of just acknowledging, right? Because I have seen instances where the writing of some of my students improved dramatically. And it could not have been more clear that they got help. And I don't mind them getting help. I just would like to have them, you know, acknowledge that they got help, right? And I feel it's actually great that they're willing to get help, right? Why not use the tools that are available to us? But at the same time, the last thing you want to be known as is someone who is taking a lot of ChatGPT generated text and making it your own. Okay, that's not going to go over well with your coworkers or your boss, and certainly not with your professor. Yeah.
Thank you. And a very related question that someone asked is, how do we avoid everything just starting to sound exactly the same if all of us start using ChatGPT?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, ChatGPT is going to serve up. Let's remember one thing. Every time someone puts in a prompt, it generates a completely fresh response. So it's not as if you and I and everybody, every one of these, if all 282 of us that are now online prompted ChatGPT with the same question, we would get 282 different answers. Now, they may be similar, but they would be different. And no one is to say that you need to just take the verbatim response from ChatGPT and then send it off as if it's your own, right? It's really a starting point, right? And kind of like you alluded to in the discussion of the program, right? The ability to have something to kind of get us kicked off, because a lot of people might have writer's block. Right. And just like Evan Spiegel, you know, he wrote the first draft and then he went back and forth with ChatGPT and revised his speech. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to us, right? We have control over ultimately what it is that we, you know, what we call a final copy. And so, you know, I'm not at all concerned about us getting to the point where, you know, we all seem like we're speaking exactly the same language with the same tonality and the same depth. I don't think that's something that we should be worried about.
Thank you. And there are two related questions about the workforce and ChatGPT that I'm going to kind of combine into one. Yeah. The first question is, what should be done at the state level to prepare for worker displacement, but also to support implementation of AI tools, generative AI tools within workplaces? And then the second one asks specifically about young professionals and what impact this is going to have on entry-level jobs.
Okay. I mean, those are very good questions. And I'll be honest, I do not have a crystal ball. Let me address the second one first, right? I mean, the good news is despite a lot of the clickbait that we hear, you know, from news organizations, we have not seen in the history of the world where jobs are destroyed and that new jobs are not created. And so, as I mentioned, when I quoted Mandela, we have agency. And so rather than an entry-level worker coming into the workforce and doing more mundane work, right? Work that's not deeply satisfying and maybe doesn't pay well, how do you now do a jujitsu move on this trend and allow yourself to actually become an expert on ChatGPT? So there's a whole new profession that is emerging before our very eyes. It's called a prompt engineer. Now, that may sound like a funny title, but let me tell you, there's going to be people that are just going to be experts at whispering into the ear of ChatGPT or its generative AI cousins and being able to access very, very insightful information. So in many ways, if ChatGPT does eliminate entry-level jobs, it's going to eliminate the most rote, monotonous jobs. And it's going to create opportunities for people to do more interesting work, right? And this has been the case throughout history, that a lot of times technology allows us to work at the top of our skill set or at the top of our license, okay? Now, the first question is obviously challenging because we're talking about something on a state-by-state basis, right? I have a lot of experience working in Scandinavia where they have done a brilliant job of recognizing the demise of an industry and, you know, because of the high social safety net, completely retraining workers to move into a new industry like wind power or clean tech, okay? And of course, in the state of Massachusetts, where I live, there's a tremendous amount of attention on helping people that are out of work find work. And I would imagine that they would have to now begin to offer, you know, basic courses in the use of generative AI as part of the skill training, regardless of whether they're going to be people doing knowledge work or more laborious work. So I just think that, you know, the departments of unemployment, the departments of workforce development, the departments of, you know, education and training are going to have to embrace this. And I think we all know that governments don't move very quickly. And so the question is, how long will it take for our governments to catch up with this trend that, as we said, reached literally 100 million people in 2 months? You know, I wish I could be super optimistic, but I'm not. I think there's going to be latency in the system before this gets to be mainstreamed within our state institutions.
Thank you. Next question is, can you give any advice on how to phrase questions or prompts in ChatGPT to get the optimal results? And is it only available in English or are there other languages?
Well, there's 65 languages. Give me 1 second. I want to, so one of the things you want to ask ChatGPT is what if, right? What if you were doing this? What would you do? Okay. So these are what we call golden prompts. And I can share for people that are interested a short document that you can distribute that would help people understand, right? Because there's a lot to it, right? There's tonality and there's multiple personas that you might take and multiple ways that you might actually phrase a question. And it's like having a lot of dials on a machine, right? Or dials on a synthesizer for music. So it's not like you're just going to use one in isolation. You're going to use several. And what you'll notice is when you use one prompt on Bard, you'll get a very different response than if you use that same exact prompt in that same exact way on ChatGPT. So that's why rolling up your sleeves and trying it yourself and seeing what you get is only going to help you build your skills and get you to know what are the right prompts for the kind of research that you're doing.
Okay. Thank you. We've had several questions about ChatGPT in education and helping students to utilize it properly. So a couple of the different questions that have come in is one, like, how do we set standards for how it can and also can't be used, the appropriate and inappropriate uses? And then also number two, how do we grade things that were written by ChatGPT? How do we think about that?
All right. And that's a tough one. So let me start with the first one, right? So I am now teaching 4 courses this summer. One is a course on creativity and innovation at Harvard. One is a course on entrepreneurship at Harvard. One is a course on product design at Rutgers. And another one is more of a social impact course, okay? And in each case, we are leaning in hard to ChatGPT. And what we're telling the students, right? So in the creativity course, the capstone project is they are working on some social impact project where they have to bring a very creative approach to solving the problem. Okay. And I am encouraging them to use all of the generative AI tools available at their fingertips, including the image generating tools that we haven't discussed, like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and DALL-E. So as long as they are referencing the use of the technology in their final project, right? The report, the recommendations they're creating, the imagery, the presentation, I am very, very comfortable. I think they're going to be far more productive doing it than without. In the entrepreneurship and the product design course, they're doing it, they're using a lot of it for market research, okay? Because they're building a new product, or they're trying to create a new startup around a new product. And what they're looking at is, what are all of the different industries that might find this to be a problem? What are the competitive spaces? Who are the competitors that are doing this? What solutions are they creating? How well have those solutions been received? And we're getting incredibly valuable feedback through the use of generative AI, right? And so, it's happening in plain sight, because these are 3-hour classes where I'm engaged in an 1.5-hour workshop, and I'll go into the Zoom breakout room with them, or into the group classroom, and they'll be showing me what they're learning on ChatGPT, right? And we're comparing it to what we've learned directly from interviews with prospective users and other stakeholders. So it is dramatically improving the learning, and the pace of the learning and the quality of the learning. Okay. Now, to answer the second question, which is the second part of the first question, I think I tried to address this earlier. I just want them to be able to cite that they have used ChatGPT in their work. Now, since I do not teach writing classes, I'm not sure if I'm really the person to give you an answer on how to, grade writing papers. I think it's a very, very rapidly emerging topic. There's a lot of controversy, but I happen to believe that it's better to lean in. People are going to be writing in the workplace with ChatGPT. I'd rather see them learn how to use it and reference it and cite it, as opposed to say it is absolutely forbidden. Now, what we're seeing, of course, is we're returning to the old oral exams. Okay. There's a lot of people that are going back to old school. Well, you don't have to turn in a paper anymore. You're going to sit with me like you're defending your dissertation. And as the teacher, I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to judge your ability to achieve the learning outcomes based on how you respond to me verbally to questions I'm asking. So this is a return to the past, if you will. And that's something we're going to see a lot more of as well. Mm-hmm. So this is all very, very early, and a lot of new formative thinking is happening. A lot of new approaches are being debated right now. So we'll see where we wind up.
That's really interesting.
And by this, just to give you just very current, this morning, the New York Times, their wonderful podcast called The Daily, the entire episode this morning is dedicated to the use of AI in the classroom. And of course, tremendous amount of cheating that's being uncovered. So for those of you who are educators, if you don't have access, The Daily is available on pretty much every podcast streaming platform. And today is the day that they're getting into this in quite a bit of depth.
That's a great resource. Thank you. Yeah. We've also gotten quite a few questions about reliability of ChatGPT answers. I think it's pretty well known that it's not always accurate. So can you talk a little bit about the current level of accuracy, the future expected level of accuracy, and how we know?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we have heard about what is called hallucination, where it very confidently pounds on the table and convinces you that what it's saying is correct when we know it's wrong. And so there's no doubt there was a dramatic increase in the accuracy between Chat 3.5 and Chat 4, which is why it went so viral. Okay, the accuracy improved by like 15 to 20 percentage points. And as these models grow exponentially, right, where models now have trillions of attributes, the models get larger, the models get trained, they get smarter. The next level of accuracy with GPT-5 is probably going to be pretty darn near perfect. Okay, now they are holding off releasing 5 because there's so much concern about, are they unleashing it too quickly on the world, right? And I think there's been a consensus amongst a lot of the AI leaders to say, let's let ChatGPT-4 settle in for a while. Let's see how society adopts it. Let's see what issues arise, and then let's wait. So I think even though OpenAI was ready to put 5 out, I think there was a collective discussion amongst both governmental leaders and technology industry leaders. Let's hold off. But, like anything else, you have to test the veracity, right? You have to triangulate, right? So tomorrow in my creativity class, I'm talking about collective intelligence. And I have a woman that literally was a part of a Navy SEAL outfit doing counterintelligence around what was happening in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. And, and when we talk about the importance of intelligence, everything is about veracity. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of public data that is wrong. So if ChatGPT has ingested incorrect public information, it's going to spit it back at us. So we just need to go back and double or triple check it. There's nothing wrong with doing a Google search. One of the things that I think Bard does very well is it actually provides you with 3 citations, okay? And so because Google is known for being the company that has sort of, codified the internet, they maybe put a higher bar on accuracy. And so you get to play with it and say, do I want it to be very precise, kind of in between, or just, let it run? And so you have a chance to kind of control it. And then secondly, you're going to get at least 3 sites, right? It might come back with a Wikipedia page. It might come back with a website. It might come back with an article. So it gives you the ability to see whether or not what it's sharing with you is in fact contained in a credible source of information. Okay. But I have not seen a lot of this, right? I have been shockingly amazed at how accurate the stuff that I've been looking at and using is.
That's great. And you made an earlier point too, that we have to see this as a tool, but not kind of an infallible answer machine. So right. I also think to your earlier point, it's also just about double checking and, doing your own research too. We have a couple questions about equity in a couple of different ways. So one question is if you can kind of address the ways in which access to the generative AI tools that exist now have or have not been equitable. And then another question is about HR specifically, if HR teams utilize generative AI technologies, are there going to be embedded, implicit biases that they need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah. So, I did cite the Pew Research Center study early in my presentation today. And if you look for this presentation, I can share the link with you. There is no question that it is not equitable. Okay. And so, as I looked at this study, and there was so much I could have talked about, but we had 20 minutes. And so there was so much I had to remove. But this particular study looked at the usage of ChatGPT by race, by income level, by educational level, right? All of the demographic stuff that you would expect. And there's no question, more educated, more affluent people are the people that are much more likely to use ChatGPT. And then younger people, as opposed to, people of a certain age, are much more likely. So there's no question that, but this is very common in any early adopter community, right? So this is not in any way specific to ChatGPT or generative AI. It's the way that all technologies have been adapted because it has been an unlevel playing field. Okay. Now, please repeat the second question again.
Around HR. So if you utilize generative AI technology in your HR processes, and I'm imagining they're thinking specifically in hiring, then, what are the biases you should be on the lookout for and mitigating?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that long before generative AI showed up, there have been biases in hiring. Okay. And so I have been a part of many startup teams that have been looking to eliminate these biases. And part of it just comes down to company policy, right? So I led a session the other day with the founder and the CEO of probably one of the most enlightened companies in the world, one of the very first certified B corporations, right? And they were the first anti-racism country in America. They were one of the very first companies to bring people in off the welfare rolls. They were, and maybe where it's really interesting is they were one of the very first companies in America to bring incarcerated people into the workplace. And they have a policy where you have no idea until you get to the final round of interviewing what a person's race, color, creed, gender is, right? It is absolutely blind to that. The only time you know is if they finally get through 4 or 5 screens and they actually come in for the interview. And at that time, you then understand exactly who this person is, what their background is, right? So I think until we have those kind of HR policies in general, we're always going to have a bias. So now the question becomes, and it's not even generative AI, it might be all kinds of these recruiting tools, right? How are we able to maybe hide certain elements of a person's profile to replicate what cascade engineering has done so brilliantly, right? And so I would welcome to hear more about why generative AI may make this worse than it already is. It's hard to believe it could be made any worse than it already has been. But let's be honest, AI models in general are very biased. Okay. But when we talk about hiring, right, I don't know if you're looking at someone's background, the one thing that we know is ChatGPT is not very good about telling us about someone's background. Okay, that's not where it's trained, right? If you want to know about someone's background, go on LinkedIn, right? That's really where you go. So if I was in a recruiting role, I don't know if I would be using ChatGPT for recruiting. I might be using it to understand the skills that a specific position would require. But I would certainly use it to figure out what is the appropriate salary and compensation levels for a role. But I don't think I would be using it to learn about an individual. I think there are far more accurate sources like LinkedIn to use.
Thank you. We are unfortunately running low on time, so we're just going to answer a few more questions. So one that I'd like to combine is, number one is, what is the most surprising or novel application that you are seeing that you're excited about? And what is your biggest concern about the technology? So the two ends of the spectrum.
Okay. So, I mean, I've seen so many interesting applications. It would be hard to pick any one thing that I would say, but as a strategy innovation guy, there's a company that is building this very, very interesting application that allows organizational leaders to make very informed strategic decisions about new marketplaces into which to enter. Okay, so this goes so far beyond just, tell me how to write a letter and I'll write it, right? It is really guiding very strategic decision-making and collapsing the amount of research and the amount of debate, by weeks and weeks and weeks. Okay, so I would say that is probably the most novel that I have seen. And the other reason is, unlike most of the generative AI tools, they're about personal productivity. This is about organizational productivity. So it's an early preview into what I described at the very last slide of synthesized AI. It's all about driving insights. Okay, so this group is ahead of the curve. And maybe that's why I find it so novel. Now, what am I most afraid of? Well, I mean, as a professor, obviously, I'm afraid that students are not going to continue to use a lot of the skills that we all have had to use to come up through our academic careers, and lose critical thinking skills, which are already in short supply in the era of Instagram and TikTok. It's just going to be the next wave of push a button and, get everything for me. So I'm certainly concerned about that as an academic. And of course, there have been many, many, many articles that are saying the sky is falling and that, this is the beginning of the end of the world. We are nowhere close to that. I find it to be, a little bit annoying after a while to keep hearing these people saying that this is a technology that is, we're sowing the seeds of our own destruction. We're a large language model based generative AI. We are a long, long, long way away from what people would call general artificial intelligence, where, a bot takes on being sentient. Where I think a lot of people see the responses and they're so just blown away by how comprehensive and intelligent they are that they personify them. But this is just an algorithm churning out data, right? There's nothing sentient about ChatGPT, although it may seem that way. And so I think that a lot of these fears are overblown. And listen, at some point we'll have to confront this. I think we have bigger societal challenges like global warming to worry about right now. And I think ChatGPT and others can be very helpful tools in helping us be more creative about how we solve some of these other more current, more dramatic societal challenges that we face today.
That's helpful perspective. Thank you. One really quick question a couple people have asked was, what was the name of that organization that you mentioned that's doing the blind recruiting really successfully?
Oh, yeah. So I am a huge fan of this company. It's called Cascade Engineering, CASCADE. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. Fred Keller, the CEO, is a hero of mine. He just brought a completely new approach to corporate culture and treating people with dignity and respect, and they've carried that on for 50 years. So I'm in the process of writing a case study with a Brown student. We've presented our first draft at the Eastern Academy of Management in Philadelphia last month. But this is a company that has flown under the radar because Fred cares much more about having an impact than he does getting credit for the impact. And so it's one of those rare companies that they're doing amazing work and almost no one has heard of them. Okay. Now, it's not a mainstream company, right? Their customers are in the automotive industry, in the sports vehicle industry, right? People that make skidoos and jet skis and snowmobiles and trucks and stuff like that. So, they're a component supplier. So they're not a brand that most people would have ever heard of or read about. But my God, they're doing amazing work.
Thank you so much. So we are right at time. So I have one last question that I thought was a funny one that we could end on, which is, did you use ChatGPT to prepare for your talk today?
I did to some extent, yes. I mean, listen, I used many, many sources, but if I would be quite the hypocrite if I was here extolling the virtues of ChatGPT and not using it. And so I use ChatGPT, I use Bard, I used Bing. I did traditional, academic journal search, which is where I came up with the MIT article. I did Google search. Yeah, no, I used every tool at my fingertips, and all of them were helpful. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mike. This was amazing. I have been personally obsessed with ChatGPT, and I've gone to a lot of webinars on the topic, and this one by far is the one where I've learned the most in such a condensed period of time. So thank you so much for all of the effort that it took. I know it's hard to cover that much material in such a short period of time, and I'm so appreciative that you did that today. And thank you, everyone who attended today, for your interest in the topic and for spending time out of your busy day to come with us and to learn with us. I hope that you will continue to want to learn from us and from Mike specifically by joining us for our Innovate to Elevate program starting in September. And the link to join us is in the chat. And I will also follow up with an email with the recording for today's webinar, some of the resources that Mike has mentioned as follow-up material, and the link to sign up. And early bird ends in 2 days. So if you are interested, I encourage you to sign up before the end of the month. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.
Allison, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Great questions. Really appreciated all those very thoughtful questions. Have a great day.